Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Sitti Saum Sayidaturrahmah. My official number is A1M2180027. In this time, my friends and I will explain about the basic concept of language, dialect, and kinds of language. Previously, my friends had explained about language and dialect. In this section, I will explain about social dialects. For those of you who have not watched the video before, please watch it first before continuing on this part. McDavid divides language variation based on language users, which include regional dialects, social dialects, and several dialects. He further said that social dialects are variation of the language used by certain group. For example, young people in Jakarta area, when they are communicating with their friends, they use word bokap means father, nyokap means mother, gue mean I. Sedangkan di Buna misalnya kata ko mean you, diorang mean they, yang umumnya ketika kata-kata ini digunakan saat berinteraksi dengan orang yang lebih tua dianggap tidak sopan. Basically, sociolect or social dialect is a variation of language with a regard to the status, class, and social class of the speakers. In sociolinguistics, it is generally these language variations that are the most talked about, because this language variation concern all the personal problems of the speaker, such as age, education, gender, work, level of nobility, and socioeconomic conditions. The differences in language variation are not related to the content of speech, but rather differences in the fields of morphology, syntax, and vocabulary. The first one is language variation based on age. The variety of language used is based on age level. For example, variation in children's language will be different from variations in the language of adolescents or adults. The word ma'em is used by children to express different eating activities from adults. The word bobok is also a variation of children's language to express sleep activities. Pada orang dewasa atau remaja, biasanya kita kenal dengan kata makan dan tidur. The second one is language variation based on education. This language variation is a variation of language related to the level of education of the language user. For example, people who only receive primary school education will have different language variation from those who have graduated from high school. Specific words, implementation, and proportional, for example, are used by people who have higher education. People who only graduate from elementary school generally don't use these words, but they use special words or to replace specific words. Nah, umumnya kita langsung dapat membedakan dari penggunaan bahasa. Biasanya orang yang hanya mengenyam pendidikan dasar sering menggunakan bahasa pasar. Misalnya pada kasus tukang becak, lebih cenderung dengan bahasa sehari-hari yang diucapkan. Seperti berapa duit ongkos dari sini ke sana. Sedangkan orang yang berpendidikan lebih tinggi dalam bicara pun dari hati dan lebih selektif dalam memilih kata, seperti orang kantoran, Pak, berapa tarif harga dari tempat ini ke lokasi? Itu. The third one is language variation based on gender. Language variation related to gender, in this case, male and female. For example, the variation used by women will be different from the variation in language used by men. Women's language variation are generally more soft than men's. Language variation based on gender can also be seen from the vocabulary produced. The words such as sarung, peci, mustache, and others relate to men, while the words such as sanggul, lipstick, pretensi, veil, and others related to women. The fourth one is language variation based on word. These language variations are related to the types of profession, occupation, and tax for the language users. For example, the variation used by workers, teachers, and doctors certainly have different variation in language. Teachers, for example, use students, words, curriculum, semester exams, report cards, and others which are different from the variation in the language of doctors who use syringes, prescriptions, drugs, and others. The fifth one is language variation based on the level of nobility. Language variation based on the level of nobility is the variation of language related to the level and position in the community. For example, there are differences in the variety of language used by kings and ordinary people in the field of vocabulary, such as the word mati for ordinary people, while king used the word mangkat. Nah, dalam sistem kerajaan Muna di daerah Muna, stratifikasi masyarakat Muna dibagi dalam 3 golongan. Pertama, kaum Mu adalah golongan para raja, panglima perang, kapita lau atau kapten laut yang hakikatnya sebagai penguasa. Kedua, Walaka adalah golongan Bontobalano atau Perdana Menteri, Dewan Sara atau biasa kita kenal dengan Dewan Perwakilan Rakyat, pemangku adat, dan yang ketiga adalah Maradika, adalah golongan rakyat Jalata. Nah, golongan kaum Mu Walaka menggunakan kata tumangka untuk aktivitas makan, sedangkan golongan Maradika biasanya menggunakan kata huma. Sering berkembangnya waktu dan adanya dinamika sosial, maka sistem kerajaan tidak lagi diterapkan dan stratifikasi sosial tidak lagi digunakan karena adanya percampuran darah. Lebih kurangnya seperti itu. Jika ada kesalahan dari saya bisa dibenarkan di kolom komentar di bawah ini. Last one is language variation based on socioeconomic condition. Language variation based on the economic level of the speakers are language variation that have similarities with language variation based on the level of nobility. It's just that the economic level is not absolute as inheritance as is the level of nobility. For example, someone who has a high economic level will have a different variety of language from people who have a weak economic level. The example of weak economic level use the word nasi aking and nasi gaplek, while high economic level use the words pizza, pasta to refer the types of food. Differences between social dialects and geographic dialects I will only discuss from the social dialect side, while from the geographic dialect side my friends will discuss it. Alright. In social dialect is usually a language based on gender, age, occupation, economic status that distinguish the rich from the poor, or social status as we see in people who recognize caste or the existence of an educated group from an uneducated group. Differences also occur because of the status of power that comes from politics, which gives birth to groups and groups of common people. I think that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. If there is a mistake during my explanation, I'm so sorry. And if you have any suggestion, please comment below. Last word I want to say, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.